Rejection always precedes transformation. You have already had some transformations, but in order to succeed in the one that is coming for you, you have to let go of who this world has told you your family, your spouse, your parents, your siblings are, and change your mind so you can see your true spouse, your true family, and your real parent. This world convinced you that the people who raised you were your parents. Maybe you were raised by a caregiver. Maybe you were raised by a sibling. Maybe you were raised by a stranger. But this person that you know to be, or these people that you know to be your parents, are not your real parents. They just were the people who were watching over you for a time. The same thing goes for your siblings, friends. Up until this point, everything that you thought these people were to you has been a lie. And that is the lie that is told on this side. And in order to transition into your next form, you have to let go of the mindsets of this world. The first transformation you experienced was when you came here to earth. Prior to being here, you were with your real father. And he knew you. You had a wonderful relationship with him. And he talked to you about the assignment on earth. And the big assignment is to bring heaven to earth. There will be a new heaven and a new earth. And so he talked about that big assignment and how he was sending many of your brothers and sisters to this side for that assignment, and that each one of his children had a part to play. Once you were explained everything, he sent you into a womb, and he had the date and time set for your arrival. Everything was planned. He had already predestined everything concerning you. And so your first transformation, you're born here from a woman, and what's the first thing you do? You're crying, most likely. And you're crying in your current language. You haven't conformed to the world's language. Whatever geographical location you were born into, that's what language you learned. So at this time, you haven't conformed to the likeness of those around you. Now here you're on this side, and you have the natural form of a baby, but you're not spiritually a baby. Spiritually, you've been around for a long time. This is why Jesus could say to the religious leaders of his day, before Abraham was, I am. Because he was referring to a spiritual thing. Mostly everything that Jesus talked about was spiritual, but it's hard for people to comprehend the spiritual things when they are not awakened. But because you are on that path, you will understand this message. And so I want to talk about two types of people that are being awakened right now. The first person is the person that experienced rejection mostly all of their life. You tried to fit in no matter what you did. People didn't like you. You were misunderstood. Even in your family, people who were supposed to receive you and accept you didn't. You tried to adjust and change form, and you tried to be nice and be agreeable and do the things that you thought would make them like you and love you and accept you, but it never seemed to work. You were the misfit because you didn't fit. You were the square trying to fit into the circle. Parts of you just continued to stick out. And so you were rejected. You were rejected by people you wanted to love you. You weren't accepted by your parents. You weren't accepted by your family. You weren't accepted by friends. You weren't accepted by those who were around you. Most of the people just didn't understand you. No matter how hard you tried, you all were speaking a different language. This is the first group. The second group are people who were accepted. You were loved by your earthly parents. You felt understood. You had some difficulties, but for the most part, people liked you. You had friends. You would fit in and so forth. But now you are experiencing the separation. You feel the need to come out from among them and be separate. You feel the pull to something greater. You see that you're different from those people around you, and there is something pulling you away, calling you again to come out from among them and be separate. This call to come out from among them is the call for everyone who is awakening, whether you're in the first group of people or the second. And so again, that's why rejection always precedes transformation. Either you're in the first group where you were rejected by people, or you're in the second group where you are now rejecting people. Either way, rejection precedes transformation. And the bigger the rejection, the more significant the transformation. When we first came here as a baby, people consider it a fall from grace, where there was an experience of rejection because we were then separate from our Father, whereas we had never been separate before. For some of you, there were other signs of rejection during your childhood. Take Jesus, our big brother, for example. He was rejected from his mother's womb. Now, his purpose on this side was so significant, and likewise for some of you, because your assignment on this side is so significant, there were things spoken and revealed about you even at a very young earthly age, where perhaps information was given to one of your parents, maybe your mom. Maybe you said or did something that revealed something very unique about you. And so in Jesus's case, an angel came to both of his parents repeatedly to warn them of things coming. An angel came to Jesus's mom first and let her know who her son was, the baby in her stomach. And the Bible says she hid the things in her heart. She was constantly given information. Men, wise men, would come to her and let her know things about her son. Even with all of that information, that didn't change the rejection that Jesus experienced from his earthly parents and from his earthly siblings and the community and the people he grew up around. Likewise, it didn't change the rejection he had to give to those people. I find it interesting that Joseph, Jesus's father, rejected him in the beginning when he was in his mother's womb. And then as Jesus is about to take a new form, he is about to be transformed into his glorified body. There at the cross, his earthly father was not there, nor were his siblings, though his mother was. His mother was also there when he stepped into a new form at the age of 30. And we see this at the wedding of Cana, where his mother comes to him, obviously having the information she has about who he is, and tells him that they need more wine for their party. And Jesus says to her, "Woman, it's not my time." But see, the Father had appointed a time for that transformation, as well as the transformation before his glorified body, as well as the transformation into his mother's womb. And so there's a time set by the Father for each transition and each transformation in your life. And the rejection, the pain, the heartache, the confusion, the loneliness, everything that causes the separation is to prepare you for the transition. And the world's goal, if your mind is conformed to the world, you will miss your Father calling you because you will be distracted by the things you're experiencing. Take loss, for example. When there is a separation from someone, the mindset of this world is to never get over who you lost, what you lost, what was taken from you, what door was closed. It's hard for people to grieve when they have the mindset of this world, because they don't understand that, number one, the person that you lost, they were only meant to be with you for an appointed time. And you were supposed to both enjoy them as they were there for just a season, as well as learn from them. But some of you can't get over your ex relationship. Some of you can't get over the person that passed, when in reality, because their spirit, they are still alive. They're just not in the form that they were. Not only that, but there's only one family. You were called to be married to the Lamb. You are the bride of Christ. You are a part of an eternal family. So that's one form of rejection coming to you. The next form of rejection, of you rejecting others. We see that when Christ is out about his Father's business and someone comes and says, your mother and your brother are calling for you, and he rejects them. He says, who is my mother? Who is my brother? Those who do the will of my Father. And so I want to end this podcast with Galatians 4, and I'm reading from the Amplified version of the Bible. Verse 1. Now what I mean when I talk about children and their guardians. So again, the family you were born into, the people who raised you, are not your real family. Now perhaps they will come to a point of awakening, but that's not your concern. And if you try to bring them to the place you are, where your eyes have been opened, you will become more frustrated, and it will slow down your pace. There is a pace to this thing. There is an appointed time that the Father is trying to get you to. And so those people who raised you were guardians for an appointed time. And whether you think they were good guardians or bad guardians, your dad chose those people for you. He knew that that particular environment, that geographical location, that job, those people, that situation would force you, as you were in this egg, to finally break free. When a farmer is raising chickens and ducks and things, and an egg is about to hatch, it's common to want to peel back the outside of the egg and help the chick. But if the farmer does that, then the chick's legs will not be strong for life outside of the egg. There is a strength that is built as the chick is having to wrestle and break free from the egg. Likewise for you, what you've been cocooned in has been very important for when you get your breakthrough. Because once you have gotten your breakthrough, it will be time to run quickly, to move fast. And so, continuing in verse 1, this is, as long as the heir is a child, he does not differ at all from a slave, even though he is the future owner and master of all the estate. So if you think about a good movie that you've seen, where there was a king in the movie, and the king had children, or a child, and in those children, that child was an heir to everything the king has. That king had a kingdom, and everything in the kingdom was going to be given to the child at an appointed time, when the child was old enough. Likewise, your real dad, he is a king. He's the king of all kings. The best king there ever was, the best king there will ever be. And he has a kingdom. And he has placed his kingdom inside of you to help you remember who you were in the beginning. He also sent his spirit here into this world to help and bring all things to your remembrance. Everything that he commanded and told you to do when you came to this side, when you came to earth. And you were with your Father before the foundations of the world even began. and you were chosen by your Father all the way back then. And so your Father is planning to bring heaven to earth. And so verse 2, but he, this is the heir, this is the child, this is you, is under the authority of guardians and household administrators or managers until the date set by his father when he is of legal age. Again, you as a child, even you as an adult, you have been under the pressures of these guardians, these people, these authorities. You've been distracted by the rejection of them, and so forth and so on. Verse 3, so also we, whether Jews or Gentiles, when we were children, spiritually immature, we were kept like slaves under the elementary man-made religious or philosophical teachings of the world. And so this is speaking of people who grew up in church, for example, or people who didn't grow up in church. Say you grew up in a church and you were taught man's system. You were taught man's doctrine. You were taught man's ways, how they do things. Perhaps you grew up in an organization, a religious system that was not able to develop or mature you, because anything man-made will always have a cap to it. And this is why Jesus spoke so aggressively against the religious system and the religious teachers of his day. And he would say things like, they stop themselves from entering into the kingdom of heaven, and they stop other people too. And so you either have that situation, or perhaps you were raised believing science or a philosophical way of thinking about the universe and God and you and evolution and how you came here. And likewise, you hit a cap. Because again, any man-made system will only take you so far. And that's why you have questions. That's why you've always had questions. Verse 4, but when in God's plan the proper time had fully come, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, the regulations of the law. And so this is referring to Jesus first. There was an appointed time for Jesus. God, your Father, predestined Jesus to be the first of many other brothers. And when I say brothers, I'm referring to both male and female. So Jesus was sent here as the first, born of a woman, the same way we were. And the thing about Jesus is his mission was so important. His assignment was so specific that he couldn't err at all. The way he had to make was so distinctive. The truth he had to give was so specific. The life he needed to live had to be so accurate, because he was the forerunner. He was the one who set everything in place for us. Verse 5, so that he might redeem and liberate those who were under the law. And again, this is the church law. And not every church is under this law, but a lot of churches are. And so this is referring to the philosophical law as well as the religious law, that we who believe might be adopted as sons, as God's children with all rights, as fully grown members of the family. So again, if we remain children, even though we are future owners of the entire estate, we are heirs to the throne. We're no different than a slave. Verse 6, and because you really are his sons, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying out, Abba, Father. Now, you remember we talked about your first transition here, and you came out and you were crying in your language. This is why having your spiritual language, your heavenly language, is very important. Because as you are transitioning into your next form, you will begin to cry out again. just as you did when you were transformed here into your earthly body. Verse 7, therefore, you are no longer a slave, bondservant, but a son. And if a son, then also an heir through the gracious act of God through Christ Jesus. Verse 8, but at that time when you did not know the true God and were unacquainted with him, you Gentiles were slaves to those pagan things which by their very nature were not and could not be gods at all. So prior to this transformational moment, you really didn't know God. Maybe you were told about someone or something in a church, in a class, reading a philosophical novel or book. But up until this point, you didn't know God and you didn't know you. That's what religious laws and religious doctrines are designed to do. They're designed to keep you from your true identity and keep you as a slave to your overseer, asking permission to go and visit another church, being forced to adhere to laws and procedures that were actually things that Jesus talked against. Verse 9, now, however, since you have come to know the true God through personal experience, or rather to be known by God, how is it that you are turning back again to the weak and worthless elemental principles of religion and philosophies to which you want to be enslaved all over again? And so, why are you turning back? You have the revelation. You have an understanding, and it may not be clear, but you know that stuff you came out of was not God. That stuff that you came out of were things of this world, things that were designed by this world to keep you trapped, to keep you conformed, to keep you stuck, to lull you to sleep. And so now that you know the truth, why would you look back? Now that you know the truth of who your family really is, that you have many brothers, that Jesus was the first of many. Now that you know who your real father is, why would you continue to turn back to try to be accepted by the very people who were designed to reject you? Because again, rejection always precedes transformation. Why would you keep turning back to those people and to those things? For example, you observe particular days and months and seasons and years. Verse 11, I fear for you, that perhaps I have labored to the point of exhaustion over you in vain. Believers, I beg of you, become as I am, free from the bondage of Jewish ritualism and ordinances, for I have become as you are, a Gentile. So what Paul is saying is he knew those systems, both the philosophical and the religious system, very well. He excelled in them and they kept him in more bondage. And so finally he came to a point where he had to forget the things that were behind. Forget the people who are behind. Some researchers believe that Paul actually had a family at one point. That because he was a part of the Sanhedrin court, there were certain things that had to be in place for you to be a part of that. And perhaps one of those things were being married and having a family. But he chose to forget the things that were behind. What happened in that situation with his family, if he had one, I'm not sure. One thing that he did experience, which was proof of his transformation, was a name change. We see that with other people in Scripture. Them being referred to by one name and then being referred to by another name. Jacob and Israel. Sarah and Sarai. Abraham and Abram, Saul and Paul. And so he had to forget the things that were behind and press forward to the things that were ahead. He had to throw off the sin and the thing. So the sin, it could be your sin or it could be the sin of other people. Sometimes the things that hold us back are the sins of other people that we have been entangled and wrapped up in. You have to throw off that sin and the other things that entangle you so that you can run forward into your race with perseverance. So moving on to verse 16. So have I become your enemy by telling you the truth? These men, the Judaizers, eagerly seek you to entrap you with honeyed words and attention, to win you over to their philosophy, not honorably, for their purpose is not honorable or worthy of consideration. They want to isolate you from us who oppose them so that you will seek them. This is the goal, unfortunately, of many religious leaders, whether they realize it or not. It's to isolate you from the truth and get you conformed to their religious system, get you conformed to their religious way of doing things, which is not God's way. They seek to entrap you in their organization and separate you from other believers. We're Pentecostal because we believe this and we're separate from them. We're Baptist because we believe this and we're separate from them. We're Catholic because we believe this and we're separate from them. We're Seventh-day Adventist because we believe this and we're separate from them. We're Presbyterian because we believe this and we're separate from them. These people, they seek to entrap you. They win you over with their words and these obligations, and they put these heavy weights on you. They do it now the same way their forefathers did it during Jesus' time. He talked about it. The religious leaders that pile all these weights and requirements on people, but then themselves don't even lift a finger. They want to win you over because they want a big church. They want to win you over because they want a big ministry. I'm not saying that they don't care about you, but they definitely care more about the agenda of men than they do you. If they didn't, they would not be conforming to the agenda of men, and they would not be forcing you to conform to it either. And then if you try to speak up, if you try even in a timid way to suggest or show something different, oftentimes you are shut down and rejected because, again, their purpose is not honorable. In order to see the fruit of a tree, you have to be close enough. Jesus wasn't just making a wrong judgment about the religious leaders of his day. He had spent time around them. He spent many years in the temple. And so he knew the fruit. You can only see the fruit on the tree if you're close enough to see the fruit on the tree. And most people don't ever get that close. Moving on to verse 21. Tell me, you who are bent on being under the law. So he's saying you people who are so determined to be enslaved by these worldly, religious, and philosophical systems. He's saying, do you not listen to what the law really says? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by the slave woman Hagar, and one by the free woman Sarah. But the child of the slave woman was born according to the flesh and had an ordinary birth, while the son of the free woman was born in fulfillment of the promise. And so likewise, the fulfillment of your assignment and your purpose here can only be attained through your transformation of becoming free. If you are bent on staying conformed to this world, conformed to religious systems and doctrines and ordinances, conformed to philosophical and scientific doctrines and ordinances, you will never inherit your promise. You will never accomplish what your Father sent you here to do. Verse 24, now these facts are about to be used by me as an allegory. That is, I will illustrate by using them. For these women represent two covenants. One covenant originated from Mount Sinai, where the law was given, that bears children destined for slavery. She is Hagar. So again, unless you change your mindset and let go of those people, to let go of their ways, to let go of the world's mindset of who you are based on where you came from and who raised you, you will continue to be a slave like them. Verse 25, now Hagar represents Mount Sinai in Arabia, and she corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above, that is, the way of faith, represented by Sarah, is free. And this is our mother. Verse 28, and we, believing brothers and sisters like Isaac, are children not merely of physical descent, like Ishmael, but are children born of promise, born miraculously. Again, this is you. This is why you came here. Your father didn't send you to earth in your first form to be a slave to this world and the elements of this world. He sent you here as his son to be free. I read a quote once that was said to be by Harriet Tubman, and it read, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more had they only realized they were slaves. Your freedom is going to be determined by what you realize, your ability to change your mind, to be able to look at the things around you and realize what this world has told you they are to you, who this world has told you you are in relation to people and things, and then realize who you really are in relation to them. Verse 29, but as at that time the child of the ordinary birth, born according to flesh, persecuted the son who was born according to the promise and the working of the Spirit, and so it is now also. Again, your rejection, your dismissal, your unacceptance from those people was what was destined to happen. Children of the slave woman have always persecuted the children of the free woman. So it was then, and so it is now. It's interesting, the religious leaders of Jesus' day, the ones who crucified him, claimed to know God's word so well, but then they didn't understand Jesus. They didn't know who he was. Now, other spirits knew who he was. People came from all over to be healed by him because they knew who he was. But the very people who studied him, who probably considered themselves perfect in the law of Moses, perfect in the Torah, had no clue who he was. Now, there were some who had a little bit of sense, like Nicodemus, who came to him asking questions, but others of them did not. And because they continued to be blind, as Jesus would often call them in front of people, he would call them blind guides. He would call them hypocrites. Likewise, there are a lot of blind guides and hypocrites leading you now, and you know they're blind. You know they're hypocrites, so then why do you keep turning back to them? You will never complete your assignment. You will never get past this transitional state if you are bound by the slave woman. Jesus challenged the way the religious leaders saw their faith. He challenged the way they viewed their God. He challenged them in their routines and their rituals and their doctrines and their ideas, because he wanted them to be free, but they chose something different. And so, verse 30, what does the scripture say? Cast out the bondwoman, Hagar, and her son Ishmael. Get rid of them. For never shall the son of the bondwoman be heir and share the inheritance with the son of the free woman. You want these people to go with you, they can't. They're only holding you back. And the way the mindset of this world works is that you keep trying, you keep doing. Most people in this world are insane because they keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. These people cannot go with you. Verse 31. So then, believers, we who are born again, reborn from above, spiritually transformed, renewed, and set apart for his purpose. We are not children of a slave woman, the natural, but of the free woman, the supernatural. And so, my brothers and sisters, in order to continue on this path of transformation, you must get to know Jesus. Not the Jesus of most of the churches of today, but the Jesus of the Bible. He made sure we had the truth about him. But again, one of the ways of the world is to not seek out truth on their own. You'd rather listen to what a preacher tells you than go and find out for yourself. You'd rather believe what somebody else tells you than go and investigate for yourself. That's a mindset, that's a way of this world. And having that mindset and being that way will not cause your transformation. It will continue to delay it.